The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in January, and I knew before opening it that my peaceful life in Pinewood Estates, Montana, was about to become considerably less peaceful. I'm Curtis Winters, and I'd been living in this subdivision for exactly 3 years when the HOA decided my wood stove was suddenly a problem. The timing was perfect, naturally. The temperatures had dropped to 15 below zero, and my wood stove was the primary reason my heating bills weren't bankrupting me every month. I stood in my kitchen, still wearing my work boots from the logging company, staring at the letter that informed me I had violated Section 12.4 of the HOA covenant regarding unauthorized heating installations. The thing is, I'd had the wood stove professionally installed 2 winters ago. I'd pulled permits through the county. I'd had inspections. Everything was done by the book because I'm not the kind of person who cuts corners, especially not with something that could burn my house down. But according to this letter, signed by none other than Brenda Patterson, HOA president and self-appointed guardian of neighborhood aesthetics, my wood stove was an eyesore, a safety hazard, and a violation of community standards. I read the letter 3 times, my coffee getting cold on the counter. The letter demanded I remove the wood stove within 30 days or face daily fines of $200. $200 a day. I did the math quickly. That would be $6,000 a month if I didn't comply. My jaw clenched as I read Brenda's flowing signature at the bottom of the page. I'd had exactly 2 interactions with Brenda Patterson before this moment. The first was when I moved in, and she'd appeared at my door with a binder 3 inches thick containing every HOA rule, highlighted and tabbed. The second was 6 months ago when she'd left a note on my truck complaining that my firewood stack was visible from the street. I'd moved it to the back of my property that same day, even though the covenant said nothing about firewood storage. I was trying to be a good neighbor. My phone rang, breaking my concentration. It was my buddy Jake from work. "You see the snow forecast?" he asked. "Another storm coming. Supposed to dump 2 feet starting Friday. Going to be a cold one too. Might hit 30 below with the wind chill. Perfect." Absolutely perfect timing for the HOA to threaten my primary heat source. I told Jake about the letter and he let out a low whistle. "Brenda Patterson? Yeah, I've heard about her. My cousin lives in Meadowbrook and their HOA president is friends with her. Apparently, she's got HOAs in 3 counties sharing information and tactics. Real piece of work." After we hung up, I pulled out all my documentation for the wood stove installation. Permit applications, approved permits, inspection certificates, installation receipts. Everything was in order. The stove was a high-efficiency Vermont castings model, installed by a licensed contractor named Mike Rodriguez, who'd been doing this work for 20 years. The chimney was proper height, proper clearance from the roof line, with a spark arrestor and rain cap. The interior installation had the required clearances from all combustible materials, proper floor protection, and met every specification in the Montana Building Code. I decided to call Mike first thing in the morning, but that evening, I went to visit my neighbor Tom across the street. Tom had lived in Pinewood Estates since the development was built 8 years ago. He was retired military, a straight shooter who didn't tolerate nonsense. "Come in, Curtis," Tom said, ushering me into his warm living room. I noticed he had a gas fireplace going. "You look stressed." I showed him the letter. His expression darkened as he read it. "This is about the wood stove, the one you had installed 2 years ago with all the proper permits. That's the one." Tom handed the letter back to me and shook his head. "Brenda's been getting worse. Last month she tried to fine the Johnsons because their Christmas lights were the wrong shade of white." "Wrong shade, Curtis. She had a color temperature meter. What happened? Mr. Johnson is a lawyer. He sent her a cease and desist letter, and suddenly the fine disappeared. Tom leaned back in his chair. The problem is most people in this neighborhood don't want to fight. They just pay the fines or comply with whatever crazy demands she makes. It's emboldened her. I'm not removing my wood stove, I said. I did everything right. I have all the documentation. Then you're going to be in for a fight, Tom warned. Brenda doesn't back down easily. She sees any resistance as a personal challenge. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about the $200 daily fines, about the cold weather coming, about whether I'd have to lawyer up just to keep a legally installed appliance in my own home. At 3 in the morning, I got up and added another log to the wood stove, watching the flames through the glass door. The stove was beautiful, efficient, and comforting. During the worst cold snaps, it kept my small 3-bedroom ranch house toasty warm while my neighbors' heat pumps struggled and their electric bills soared. The next morning, I called Mike Rodriguez before heading to work. "Curtis, hey, what's going on?" I explained the situation. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "That's ridiculous," Mike finally said. "That installation was perfect. I've been doing this for 2 decades, and that's one of the cleanest installs I've ever done. Everything was inspected and approved by the county." Does your HOA even have the authority to override county building codes? That's what I need to find out. Listen, I'll come by this evening after I finish my current job. I'll do a complete inspection, take photos, document everything. If they want to challenge this, we'll have everything ready. Mike showed up at 6 that evening with a clipboard, camera, and laser measuring tools. He spent an hour going over every aspect of the installation, measuring clearances, checking the chimney from the roof, examining the interior components. When he finished, he sat at my kitchen table and shook his head. "Curtis, this installation exceeds code requirements. You've got better clearances than required, premium materials, professional installation. There's not a single thing wrong with this stove. In fact, during cold weather like we're having, this is exactly the kind of supplemental heating that building codes encourage. Can you document that in writing?" "Absolutely. I'll write up a detailed report, but I'd also recommend getting the county inspector out here." The guy who signed off on this originally was Bill Thompson. He's retired now, but the current chief inspector is Sarah Chen. She's thorough and fair. If she confirms the installation is code compliant, that's going to be hard for your HOA to argue against. I called the county building department the next morning and explained my situation to the receptionist. She put me through to Sarah Chen. "Mr. Winters, I'm looking at the permit history for your address now," Sarah said. I could hear typing in the background. "Wood stove installation, permitted and inspected 2 years ago. Passed inspection on the first visit, which is actually impressive. What's the problem? My HOA is claiming it violates their rules and wants it removed. You have a copy of your HOA covenants?" "Yes." "I'd like to see them, specifically the section they're citing. Can you bring them by my office this afternoon? I'll also schedule a re-inspection for tomorrow morning if that works for you. I want to see this installation myself." I took a late lunch and drove to the county building in downtown Missoula, about 40 minutes from my house in Pinewood Estates. Sarah Chen was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She reviewed my HOA letter and then pulled out my covenant documents, flipping to section 12.4. "Unauthorized heating installations," she read aloud. "This section talks about outdoor heating units, specifically mentioning outdoor wood boilers and similar equipment that produce visible smoke or odors affecting neighboring properties. Your wood stove is an indoor, EPA-certified appliance. This section doesn't apply. That's what I thought, but I'm not a lawyer. You might need one, Sarah said bluntly. But first, let's get the inspection done. I'll be at your house tomorrow at 9. Make sure you're available. Sarah showed up promptly at 9 the next morning. The temperature had dropped overnight, and my wood stove was running, keeping the house at a comfortable 68 degrees. Sarah spent even longer than Mike had, examining everything with meticulous attention to detail. She took her own measurements, photos, and notes. She even went into the attic to inspect the chimney chase and clearances from the framing. After 90 minutes, she sat down at my kitchen table and opened her laptop. "Mr. Winters, I'm writing this report now, and I want you to see it before I file it officially," she said. "Your wood stove installation is not only code compliant, it exceeds current Montana cold weather heating codes. The installation was done professionally, with premium materials and better than required clearances. The stove itself is EPA certified, high efficiency, and exactly the type of supplemental heating source that we encourage in Montana homes for both economic and safety reasons during extreme cold weather events." I felt relief wash over me. So the HOA is wrong. "The HOA is completely wrong," Sarah confirmed. "Furthermore, Montana law is clear that HOAs cannot prohibit heating sources that comply with building codes. There's specific case law on this. HOAs can regulate aesthetic concerns to some degree, but they cannot prevent homeowners from maintaining safe, code-compliant heating systems, especially not in Montana, where winter temperatures can be life-threatening." She finished typing and printed 2 copies of her report, signing both with an official county seal. "One for you, one for your HOA," she said. "I'm also going to send this electronically to the HOA's registered agent. If they continue to threaten fines, you should consult with an attorney. They could be opening themselves up to liability if they force you to remove a legal heating source, and you suffer harm as a result." Armed with Mike's report and Sarah's official inspection certificate, I felt confident. I sent both documents to Brenda Patterson via certified mail that same afternoon, along with a letter explaining that my wood stove was fully code compliant and legally installed. I requested that the HOA rescind their violation notice and stated that I would not be removing the stove. The response came faster than I expected. 2 days later, another certified letter arrived. This one was even more aggressive. Brenda claimed that the HOA covenant took precedence over building codes, that aesthetic concerns were within the HOA's purview, and that my wood stove's chimney was visibly industrial and detracted from neighborhood harmony. The letter also stated that fines would begin accruing starting the following Monday, which was the end of my 30-day compliance period. "Visibly industrial," I muttered, staring at the standard residential chimney pipe on my roof. It looked exactly like a chimney pipe. There was nothing industrial about it. I called Tom again, and this time he invited me to a meeting. "There are 5 other homeowners who have been targeted by Brenda in the past 6 months, Tom explained. "We've been talking about organizing. This might be the catalyst we need. Can you come by Saturday morning? We're meeting at my house." Saturday morning was cold and clear. The predicted snowstorm had been delayed, but it was still coming, now forecast for Sunday night into Monday. I walked across the street to Tom's house and found 5 other people already there, sitting in his living room with coffee and frustrated expressions. Tom made introductions. There was Margaret Wu, who'd been fined for having the wrong style mailbox. David Foster, who'd been cited for parking his work truck in his own driveway, because it had his company logo on it. Patricia and Jim Morrison, who'd been fined for repainting their house the wrong shade of beige, even though they'd matched the original paint color exactly. And Lynette Carver, who'd been cited for having a vegetable garden visible from the street. "We've all paid at least one fine to make it go away," Margaret said. "But we're tired of it. Brenda's power tripping and it's getting worse." "The problem is the HOA board," David added. "It's only 3 people. Brenda as president, her friend Karen Holloway as vice president, and some guy named Dennis who apparently just does whatever Brenda says." "Have you attended any board meetings?" I asked. Everyone shook their heads. Patricia spoke up. "The meetings are technically open, but Brenda schedules them at weird times and doesn't always send proper notice. Last month's meeting was at 2 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. Who can make that?" "That might be a violation right there," Tom said. HOA laws require reasonable notice and accessibility for meetings. We spent the next 2 hours strategizing. Tom and I agreed to attend the next HOA board meeting together. Margaret, who worked as a paralegal, volunteered to research HOA laws in Montana and find out what our rights were. David knew a real estate attorney who might give us a consultation. The Morrisons agreed to document every interaction they'd had with the HOA, creating a timeline of Brenda's increasingly aggressive behavior. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for that Tuesday evening at 7. Tom and I both received notice, delivered to our doors on Sunday afternoon by Karen Holloway herself. She was a woman in her early 50s with a pinched expression and an obvious disdain for having to walk door to door. "The meeting is mandatory for anyone currently in violation," she said, handing me the notice. "I'm not in violation," I replied. "I have inspection certificates from both the installer and the county confirming my wood stove is code compliant." "The board will determine compliance," Karen said curtly. "Be there or face additional fines for non-cooperation." The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a small building near the subdivision entrance that mostly sat empty except for these quarterly meetings. Tom and I arrived 15 minutes early and found the room set up with a table at the front for the board members and rows of chairs facing them. It felt like a courtroom, which I suspected was intentional. Brenda, Karen, and Dennis filed in at 7 sharp. Dennis was a thin man in his 60s who kept his eyes down and barely spoke. Brenda took the center seat, placing a gavel on the table in front of her like she was a judge. Karen sat to her right, arranging papers. 3 other homeowners were scattered in the chairs. I recognized them from around the neighborhood, but didn't know them personally. Brenda called the meeting to order with an actual gavel bang, which seemed absurdly dramatic. "We have several compliance matters to address tonight," she began. "First, Mr. Curtis Winters and the unauthorized heating installation." I stood up. "I'd like to address the board. You'll have an opportunity to speak when called upon," Brenda said coldly. "Actually, under Montana HOA law, homeowners have the right to address the board on any matter affecting them," Tom interjected from beside me, "especially when facing fines." Brenda's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Proceed." I walked to the front, carrying my folder of documents. "I've submitted both a professional installer's report and an official county inspection certificate confirming that my wood stove installation is fully code compliant and exceeds all Montana cold weather heating requirements." The county inspector specifically noted that Montana law prohibits HOAs from restricting code-compliant heating sources. "I'm requesting that the board rescind the violation notice." I handed copies of both reports to Brenda. She barely glanced at them before pushing them aside. The HOA covenant clearly states that unauthorized installations are prohibited, she said. You did not seek HOA approval before installing this wood stove. The covenant section you cited applies to outdoor heating units, I countered. My installation is an indoor, EPA-certified wood stove. Additionally, I obtained all required county permits and inspections. There's no provision in our covenants requiring HOA approval for interior improvements that don't alter the home's exterior appearance. The chimney is visible, Karen interjected. It's an exterior alteration. A chimney is a necessary component of a legal heating system, Tom said from his seat. You can't claim the chimney is unauthorized when the county approved it. That's like saying windows are unauthorized because you can see them from outside. Brenda's face was reddening. Mr. Winters, the board has determined you are in violation. Fines begin tomorrow at $200 per day. You may appeal this decision in writing within 5 business days. This matter is closed. She banged the gavel. This is ridiculous, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. You're ignoring documented evidence that my installation is legal. You are out of order, Brenda snapped. Sit down or I'll have you removed from this meeting. Removed by whom? Tom asked, standing up. You have no authority to remove homeowners from an HOA meeting. This isn't your personal fiefdom, Brenda. The room went silent. The other homeowners stared, shocked by Tom's directness. Dennis shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Karen's mouth was hanging open slightly. Brenda stood up, her chair scraping loudly. This meeting is adjourned. Another gavel bang, and she swept out of the room with Karen following. Dennis gathered papers and scurried after them without making eye contact with anyone. Tom and I stood there, both frustrated and angry. One of the other homeowners, a woman I didn't know, approached us. That was brave, she said quietly. But Brenda's going to make your lives hell now. She doesn't forget and she doesn't forgive. The next morning, I found a violation notice on my door. New fines for disruptive behavior at HOA meeting and disrespecting board authority. Another $100 per day on top of the $200 for the wood stove. I was now facing $300 per day in fines, starting immediately. I took a photo of the notice and called Margaret Wu. She'd been researching HOA law with increasing intensity since our meeting at Tom's house. Curtis, this is harassment, Margaret said when I explained the new fines. And I found something interesting in the Montana HOA statutes. Board members can be held personally liable if they abuse their authority. Also, there's a specific provision about heating systems. Let me read it to you. She put me on speaker and I heard papers rustling. Here it is. No homeowners association in Montana shall prohibit or restrict the installation or use of heating systems that comply with state and local building codes, particularly those systems designed to provide adequate heating during extreme cold weather conditions. This law was passed in 2018 after an HOA in Billings tried to ban wood stoves and an elderly couple nearly froze to death. So Brenda is directly violating state law. Yes, and if she enforces these fines, she could face legal consequences. I'm going to contact my boss, the attorney I work for. This is turning into something bigger than a simple HOA dispute. The snowstorm hit that night, just as predicted. 2 feet of heavy, wet snow buried Pinewood Estates. The temperature plummeted to 25 below zero. My wood stove worked beautifully, keeping my house warm while I heard neighbors complaining on the community Facebook page about their heat pumps struggling and their electric bills skyrocketing. On Wednesday, I received another certified letter. This one informed me that I now owed $900 in fines for 3 days of violation. Payment was due immediately, and failure to pay would result in a lien being placed on my property. I'd had enough. I called the attorney David Foster had mentioned, a man named Robert Chen who specialized in HOA disputes. His office was in Missoula, and he agreed to see me that afternoon. Robert Chen was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and an air of controlled intensity. He reviewed all my documentation, the HOA letters, the inspection reports, everything. He was quiet for several minutes after finishing, tapping his pen on his desk. "This is one of the more clear-cut cases I've seen," he finally said. "Your HOA is not only wrong, they're violating state law. The question is how aggressive you want to be in responding. What are my options? Option 1 is to sue the HOA for declaratory relief and an injunction. We ask the court to declare your wood stove legal and order the HOA to stop threatening fines. That's the conservative approach, but it takes time and costs money. Option 2 is to also name the board members individually and seek damages for harassment. That's more aggressive but might be warranted given these absurd additional fines for attending a meeting. How much are we talking in legal fees? For option 1, probably $5,000 to $8,000 to see it through. Option 2 could be more, depending on how they respond. However, he leaned forward, given how clear-cut this is and given that they're violating state law, I'd be willing to take this on contingency for the damages portion. You'd pay filing fees and costs, but my fee would come from any damages we recover. Let's do option 2, I said. I'm tired of bullies. Robert smiled. Good. I'll start drafting the complaint today. In the meantime, do not pay any of these fines. Document everything. Save every letter, every email, every communication. If anyone from the HOA contacts you, be polite but don't admit anything or agree to anything. That evening, Margaret called with interesting news. Her boss, attorney Linda Yamamoto, was intrigued by the situation and wanted to meet with all of us, the homeowners who'd been targeted by Brenda. Linda specialized in class action lawsuits and thought we might have the basis for a case against the HOA board for systematic harassment and abuse of authority. We met at Linda's office on Friday afternoon. All 6 of us homeowners who'd been targeted, plus Tom who wanted to support us even though he hadn't been fined. Linda was a sharp woman in her late 40s who listened intently as each of us detailed our experiences with Brenda and the HOA board. "What strikes me," Linda said when we'd finished, "is the pattern. Every one of you has been targeted for things that are either completely legal or explicitly protected under Montana law. The vegetable garden linette, that's protected under the right to farm statutes. The work truck, David, there's case law saying HOAs can't prohibit vehicles that are used for legitimate business purposes. The house paint color, Patricia and Jim, that's arbitrary enforcement since you match the original color. The mailbox, Margaret, the covenant doesn't specify a style, so that's overreach. And my wood stove," I added. "Your wood stove is the most egregious," Linda confirmed. "They're violating a specific state statute designed to prevent exactly this situation. The question I have is about the HOA's finances. Do any of you know if Brenda or the board members are benefiting personally from these fines?" We all looked at each other. No one knew. "That's something we need to find out," Linda said. "As HOA members, you have the right to inspect the financial records. I'm going to draft a formal request for a complete accounting of all fines collected in the past 2 years and how those funds were spent. If there's any financial impropriety, this goes from a harassment case to potential fraud." Tom volunteered to submit the formal request. As a long-time resident with a clean record, he was the least likely to be accused of ulterior motives. Linda drafted the request that afternoon, and Tom hand-delivered it to Brenda's house that evening. The response was swift and hostile. The next morning, Tom found a violation notice on his door citing him for harassment of board members and fining him $500. The notice claimed that delivering the request to Brenda's home was threatening behavior. "She's panicking," Robert Chen said when I called to tell him. He was now coordinating with Linda on the broader case. "This is exactly the kind of overreach that's going to hurt her in court." Tom delivered a legal document request during daylight hours. "There's nothing threatening about that. She just fined him for exercising his rights as an HOA member." That same day, I received another letter. The HOA was scheduling a special meeting for the following Tuesday to discuss suspending voting rights and potentially terminating membership for Tom and me due to our continued disruptive behavior and refusal to comply with board directives. "They can't do that," Linda said when I showed her the letter. "Montana HOA law is very clear about the process for suspending member rights. It requires specific violations of the covenants, proper notice, an opportunity to be heard, and a vote of the full membership, not just the board. This is more evidence of their abuse of authority." The lawyers decided it was time to file. Robert prepared my individual lawsuit, and Linda began working on a class action on behalf of all the targeted homeowners. Both lawsuits were filed on Monday morning, 3 days before the special meeting the HOA had scheduled. The lawsuits hit Brenda like a freight train. Within hours of being served, I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "This is Brenda Patterson. You need to drop this lawsuit immediately." "I don't think so, Brenda. You're making a huge mistake. The HOA will fight this and you'll end up owing thousands in legal fees for nothing." "My wood stove is legal. The county confirmed it. The state law protects it." "You're the one making a mistake by continuing this. That chimney is an eyesore and I won't have it in my neighborhood," her neighborhood. That said everything about how Brenda viewed Pinewood Estates. "It's not your neighborhood, Brenda. It's our neighborhood, all of us homeowners. And you're supposed to serve us, not dictate to us." She hung up without another word. The next day, Tom received a call from Dennis, the third board member. Dennis sounded nervous and apologetic. "I didn't know things had gone this far," Dennis said. "I just signed what Brenda put in front of me. I didn't realize she was violating state law. I'm resigning from the board effective immediately." Dennis's resignation meant the board no longer had a quorum. Under the HOA bylaws, any board actions required all 3 members to be present and voting. Without Dennis, Brenda and Karen couldn't legally conduct business or enforce any decisions. Brenda, predictably, didn't see it that way. She sent out a notice canceling the special meeting, but stating that all fines remained in effect and would continue accruing daily until compliance was achieved. "She just keeps digging herself deeper," Robert said with something almost like admiration. "I've never seen someone more determined to prove our case for us." The court date for the preliminary injunction hearing was set for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, Linda's document request was finally answered, but not by Brenda. Dennis, apparently feeling guilty about his role in everything, sent Linda a complete set of HOA financial records along with a notarized statement about his resignation and concerns about the board's conduct. What those records revealed was stunning. Over the past 18 months, the HOA had collected over $40,000 in fines. According to the budget that homeowners had approved, fine money was supposed to go into a reserve fund for neighborhood improvements. But the financial records showed that $32,000 of those dollars had been paid out to consulting fees for a company called Neighborhood Harmony Solutions. Linda spent 2 days tracking down Neighborhood Harmony Solutions. It turned out to be a shell company registered to Karen Holloway's husband. The company had no website, no business license, and no evidence of providing any actual services. It was a pass-through for funneling HOA fine money to Karen's family. "This is fraud," Linda said bluntly at our emergency meeting. "This isn't just HOA overreach anymore. This is criminal misappropriation of funds. I'm obligated to report this to the authorities." "Do it," Tom said immediately. The rest of us agreed. Linda contacted the Montana Attorney General's office and the county prosecutor. Within 2 days, investigators were reviewing the documents. Within a week, Karen Holloway was arrested for fraud and theft. The charges alleged she'd embezzled over $30,000 from the HOA through the fake consulting company. Brenda wasn't arrested, but she was named as a person of interest in the investigation. The question was whether she'd known about Karen's scheme or was complicit in it. Either way, her position was untenable. The day after Karen's arrest, I came home from work to find Brenda sitting in her car in front of my house. She got out when she saw me, and for the first time since this whole mess started, she looked defeated rather than aggressive. "I need to talk to you," she said. "My attorney advised me not to communicate with you directly. Please, just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I agreed. We stood in my driveway, the February cold biting through our coats. "I didn't know about Karen's company," Brenda said. "I swear I didn't know she was stealing from the HOA. I thought the consulting fees were legitimate." "Okay. And I'm dropping all the fines against you and everyone else. I'm submitting my resignation to the HOA membership. I just want this to end." "You should have dropped the fines the moment the county inspector confirmed my wood stove was legal," I said. "You let your need to control everything override basic common sense and the law." "I know." Her voice cracked slightly. "I just wanted the neighborhood to be perfect. To look nice and maintain property values. I got carried away." "You didn't just get carried away, Brenda. You harassed people. You made up fake violations. You threatened people's homes with liens over completely legal things. That's not getting carried away. That's abusing power." She nodded slowly, tears forming in her eyes. "I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I'm genuinely sorry." She got back in her car and drove away. I felt no satisfaction from seeing her broken down. The whole situation had been exhausting and unnecessary. Brenda's resignation letter was submitted the next day. In it, she formally rescinded all pending fines and violations. She also acknowledged that my wood stove installation was legal and code compliant. The letter was sent to every homeowner in Pinewood Estates. But the legal process wasn't quite finished. The preliminary injunction hearing still took place, and the judge issued a formal order declaring my wood stove legal and prohibiting the HOA from any future actions against it. Robert also negotiated a settlement where the HOA paid my legal fees and costs, which came to about $6,000. Linda's class action on behalf of the other targeted homeowners resulted in a larger settlement. The HOA agreed to refund all fines collected over the past 2 years and implement new governance procedures, including term limits for board members, mandatory training on HOA law, and a requirement that all violation notices include specific covenant citations and a clear appeals process. Karen Holloway's criminal case moved forward. She eventually pleaded guilty to theft and fraud charges and was sentenced to 18 months in prison and ordered to make full restitution to the HOA. Her husband, who'd received the money from Neighborhood Harmony Solutions, was charged as an accessory and also ordered to pay restitution. The investigation into Brenda's involvement concluded that while she'd been negligent in her oversight of HOA finances, there wasn't sufficient evidence to prove she'd knowingly participated in Karen's scheme. No criminal charges were filed against her, though her reputation in Pinewood Estates was destroyed. An emergency HOA election was held in March to replace the entire board. Tom was elected president, with Margaret as vice president and David as treasurer. Their first action was to conduct a complete audit of HOA finances and implement transparent monthly reporting that every homeowner could access online. Their second action was to review the entire covenant document and propose amendments to the membership. The amendments included explicit language protecting code-compliant improvements, limiting the board's authority to levy fines, and requiring board approval of any fines over $100 to come from a vote of the full membership rather than just the board. The amendments passed with over 90% approval from the homeowners. It turned out that most people in Pinewood Estates had been quietly frustrated with Brenda's authoritarian approach, but hadn't known how to push back or were afraid of being targeted. Through all of this, my wood stove kept running beautifully. Montana experienced one of its coldest winters on record that year, with multiple periods where temperatures dropped below zero for days at a time. My heating bills remained manageable, while I heard neighbors complaining about $300 electric bills from running their heat pumps constantly. Several neighbors actually asked me about installing wood stoves in their own homes. I connected them with Mike Rodriguez, who suddenly found himself with more business than he could handle. By the end of winter, 5 more homes in Pinewood Estates had wood stoves installed, all with proper permits and inspections. In April, as the snow finally melted and spring arrived in Montana, Tom organized a neighborhood barbecue at the community clubhouse. It was the first social event the HOA had sponsored in years, and almost every household showed up. I stood there with a plate of burgers and potato salad, watching kids play on the grass and neighbors who'd been strangers actually talking and laughing together. Tom came over and clinked his beer bottle against mine. "We did it," he said. "We took back our neighborhood." "You did most of the heavy lifting," I replied. "I just wanted to keep my wood stove." "Your wood stove was the catalyst, though. If you just rolled over and paid the fines or removed it, Brenda would have kept escalating. We'd still be living under her thumb and Karen would still be stealing from us." He was probably right. Sometimes standing up to bullies isn't just about yourself. It's about everyone else they're going to target next. Margaret joined us, looking pleased. "I just got the final restitution check from Karen Holloway. Every homeowner who paid fines in the past 2 years is getting their money back, plus interest." "How much are we getting back?" I asked. "You weren't fined anything before this situation, so you're getting about $6,000 from the legal fee settlement. The Morrisons are getting back almost $3,000 they paid over that house paint situation. It adds up." The money was nice, but more important was the principle. The new board was functioning transparently and fairly. People weren't afraid of getting random violation notices anymore. The covenants were being enforced reasonably and consistently, and only when there were actual violations that affected the neighborhood. In June, I got a postcard in the mail. It was from Brenda Patterson. She'd apparently moved to Arizona, and the postcard had a picture of a cactus and mountains. On the back, she'd written, "I hope you're enjoying your wood stove. I really am sorry for everything, trying to do better here." I stuck the postcard on my refrigerator. It was a reminder that even people who do wrong things are still human, capable of growth and change. Brenda had let power corrupt her judgment, but she'd also acknowledged her mistakes and removed herself from the situation. That took a certain kind of courage. My life returned to normal. Work at the logging company, weekends fixing things around the house, evenings with the wood stove crackling and a book in my hand. The lawsuit and the HOA drama faded into memory, though I kept all the documentation filed away just in case. The following winter, when temperatures dropped and the snow piled up again, I sat in front of my wood stove and felt grateful. Not just for the warmth, but for the reminder that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it's difficult and uncomfortable. The wood stove had become more than just an appliance. It was a symbol of standing up to unreasonable authority and winning. Tom and I remained close friends. We'd gotten together regularly, usually at his house or mine, talking about neighborhood issues or just shooting the breeze. The bond formed through adversity proved lasting. Margaret, David, and the others also became genuine friends rather than just neighbors I waved to in passing. The new HOA board actually functioned the way it was supposed to, as a service organization that maintained common areas and handled legitimate neighborhood concerns without becoming a tyrannical bureaucracy. Dues were spent transparently on actual improvements like repaving the roads, updating the landscaping at the entrance, and fixing the irrigation system in the common areas. One Saturday in October, almost a year after the initial violation letter, I was splitting firewood in my backyard when a car pulled up. A young couple got out, looking around the neighborhood with interest. They walked over to where I was working. "Hi, sorry to bother you," the man said. "We're looking at the house for sale 2 streets over, thinking about putting in an offer. Do you like living here?" "I do now," I said. "The HOA had some issues about a year ago, but they've been completely resolved. It's a good neighborhood with good people." "We noticed several houses have wood stoves," the woman said. "We were thinking about installing one. Is that allowed?" I smiled. "Absolutely. As long as you get the proper permits and inspections, the HOA fully supports code-compliant heating systems. I can give you my installer's number if you want." They thanked me and left, looking pleased. I went back to splitting wood, thinking about how much had changed in just a year. From facing $300 a day in fines, to being able to honestly recommend the neighborhood to potential new residents. The legal settlements had been finalized months ago. Karen Holloway was serving her sentence, and the restitution payments were being garnished from her husband's wages monthly. The HOA's finances were healthy and transparent. Property values in Pinewood Estates had actually increased, partly because word spread that the neighborhood had successfully reformed its problematic HOA, which was rare enough to be attractive to buyers. As winter approached again, I made sure I had plenty of seasoned firewood stacked and ready. The wood stove had its annual cleaning and inspection, which Mike Rodriguez did for free as thanks for all the referral business. Everything checked out perfectly, just as it had from the beginning. In November, the HOA held its annual meeting to review the year and elect board members for the upcoming term. Tom was running unopposed for president again. Margaret was stepping down as vice president because she'd gotten a promotion at work that would require more travel, but David was running for that position. Several other homeowners had volunteered to join various committees. The meeting was well attended and positive. Tom presented financial reports showing how dues had been spent, all legitimate expenses for neighborhood maintenance and improvements. There were no fines listed because the new board had only issued 1 violation notice all year, for someone who'd left their trash cans at the curb for 2 weeks straight while on vacation. That violation was resolved with a polite conversation rather than a fine. At the end of the meeting, Tom asked if anyone had concerns or questions. An older man I recognized but didn't know well stood up. "I just want to say thank you to Curtis Winters," he said, gesturing toward me. If he hadn't fought back against the old board, a lot of us would still be getting shaken down for made-up violations. It took guts to stand up to them, and we all benefited from it. There was a round of applause. I felt my face getting red, uncomfortable with the attention, but also grateful for the recognition. It had been a difficult fight, stressful and expensive even with the eventual settlement. Knowing it had made a difference for the whole community made it worthwhile. After the meeting, several people came up to thank me personally. One was Lynette Carver, who'd been fined for her vegetable garden. "I'm expanding my garden next spring," she said with a grin. "Tomatoes, peppers, squash, the works, and I'm not afraid anymore." That simple statement captured everything. Not being afraid in your own home, in your own neighborhood. That's what we'd won. December brought heavy snow and bitter cold. My wood stove ran almost constantly, maintaining comfortable warmth while the wind howled outside. I'd invited Tom over for dinner one evening, and we sat in my living room after eating, watching the fire through the glass door of the stove. "You ever think about what would have happened if you just removed the stove when Brenda first demanded it?" Tom asked. "Sometimes. I'd be out a couple $1,000s for nothing, my heating bills would be outrageous, and Brenda would probably still be president, terrorizing the neighborhood. And Karen would still be embezzling. That too." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, just enjoying the warmth and the quiet. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the neighborhood in white. It was peaceful in a way it hadn't been a year ago when every day brought new threats and escalating conflict. "You know what I learned from all this?" Tom said eventually. "What's that?" "Most people just want to live their lives in peace. They'll put up with a lot to avoid conflict. But there's always a line, and when someone crosses it, that's when ordinary people become extraordinary. You found your line with the wood stove. I found mine when she went after you, and together we changed things." He was right. The wood stove violation had been my line in the sand. Not because the stove was so critically important, though I certainly valued it, but because the demand was so fundamentally unjust. I'd done everything right, followed every rule, and was still being punished for no legitimate reason. Something in me couldn't accept that. The legal fight had cost Brenda her position and reputation. It had cost Karen her freedom and tens of thousands of dollars. It had cost all of us time, stress, and emotional energy. But it had also resulted in a better, more functional neighborhood where people felt safe and respected in their own homes. In January, almost exactly a year after receiving that first violation notice, I was doing some maintenance on the wood stove. As I cleaned out the ash pan and checked the gaskets, I thought about everything that had happened. The confrontations, the lawsuits, the discovery of Karen's fraud, the arrests, the settlements, the reforms. It had been a wild ride triggered by something as simple as wanting to keep my house warm. My phone rang. It was Robert Chen, the attorney. "Curtis, I wanted to let you know that I'm using your case as an example in an article I'm writing for the Montana Bar Journal," he said. "It's about HOA overreach and homeowner rights. Your situation was such a clear example of everything that can go wrong when HOA boards aren't properly checked. I wanted to make sure you were okay with that. As long as you change my name. Of course, but I wanted to thank you personally. A lot of attorneys see HOA cases as small potatoes, not worth the trouble. But your case reminded me why property rights matter. Homeownership is supposed to mean something. You shouldn't have to fear losing your home or facing financial ruin because someone on a power trip doesn't like your legal heating system. After we hung up, I sat back and looked at the wood stove. It was just a metal box that burned wood to make heat, nothing special or magical about it. But it had become the focal point of something much larger, a battle over principle and authority and the rights of homeowners to live peacefully in their own properties. The wood stove continued running perfectly, day after day, winter after winter. It heated my home efficiently and economically. It provided a comforting focal point on cold evenings, and it served as a permanent reminder that sometimes the right thing to do is fight back, even when it's difficult, even when the outcome is uncertain. Years would pass, and the drama with Brenda and Karen would fade further into memory. New residents would move into Pinewood Estates who'd never know about the turmoil that had once consumed the neighborhood. But the reforms would remain. The transparent governance, the reasonable enforcement, the respect for homeowner rights. Those were Brenda's unintended legacy, born from her overreach and sustained by people who decided enough was enough. As for me, I continued living simply. Working hard, maintaining my house, enjoying my wood stove every winter. The settlement money went into savings. The legal bills were paid. Life returned to normal, or at least what passed for normal. But I was different in small ways, more willing to speak up when something wasn't right, more aware of my rights and responsibilities, more connected to my neighbors and community. The wood stove burned on, warming not just my house, but serving as a small beacon of the principle that individuals have rights that cannot be arbitrarily taken away, not even by organizations with official-sounding names and self-important leaders. Sometimes you just have to stand your ground, present your facts, and refuse to be bullied. And sometimes, when you do that, you win.